Happy Halloween, everyone, from the creepy fox to all of you. Can you believe it? We're practically at the end of the month, but that doesn't mean we aren't done with the Halloween season just yet. That's right, friends. Make sure to sit back and relax and enjoy this extra special episode. Let's get into it right now. We begin today's episode with an extra creepy trick or treating story. Trick or treat, more like trick to me. Alrighty, everyone. This takes place in my hometown of Las Vegas, Nevada. It was Halloween night, and myself and my best friend, who in this story we will call Jeremy, decided to go trick or treating in this really nice neighborhood. Just to quickly mention, we're both 14 years old. Now, normally, I can understand many people by this age have given up trick or treating, choosing to pass out candy, or maybe play video games, or even yet, going to a party. But to us, trick or treating was the best. My friend Jeremy, being the music buff he is, dressed up as Lil Wayne, and I myself, being the scary fan, dressed up as Jason Voorhees. Quite the difference, you might be wondering. But just wait until you hear what happens next. So, we start doing some trick or treating, and so far everything seems normal. Kids are walking around in their costumes, and we're jumping from house to house, collecting as many sweets as we could. I want to say it was between our 15th to 20th house, we started to notice something that was a bit strange. You see, there was this really tall guy, dressed up as the Grim Reaper, just standing behind Jeremy and I. Now, when I say tall, I'm talking about close to 7 feet, maybe something like 6'7". They were pretty average build, but it was difficult to get an exact build estimate due to his costume covering their entire body. Here's something else that was a bit suspicious. He had no sort of pillowcase, not even a bucket to put candy or chocolate in. Regardless, we grabbed our candy and we leave. A few houses later, we turned around, and the suspicious Grim Reaper character is just staring over at Jeremy and I from the sidewalk. I remember whispering to Jeremy and saying, "Hey, is it just me? Or have you noticed that Grim Reaper person following us?" I was then interrupted by the homeowner, who overheard the conversation. She said, "Be very careful with that person. If they try to put their hands on you or try to grab you, come back here. My husband will knock the living daylights out of that creep." We take this into consideration, and we fast forward about 30 minutes. We were now at the final house for the evening, and we just got in our candy. While we began heading over to a bus stop, where we first arrived at, I could hear Jeremy say something. However, it sounded muffled, sort of as if he put his hand over his mouth. Bear in mind, I hadn't paid attention to the fact that he was just a bit behind me. So I turn around, and to my absolute fear, that person that was dressed up as the Grim Reaper has a hold of Jeremy. He's covering his mouth while keeping him wrapped up, sort of like in a reverse bear hug of sorts. I knew right there and then this person was tough, because Jeremy couldn't get out of his hold. Immediately, my adrenaline is pumping 100 miles an hour, and I'm trying to see if I could locate some trick-or-treaters, or an adult. No one. Therefore, I had to take matters into my own hands to save my friend. Using the prop machete I was holding onto, I wield it tightly, and bam, I connect on this costume freak's right eye. This was enough for them to lose their grasp, and my friend is able to get out of the hold. Right there and then, he lets out an agonizing scream, and we pretty much booked it, dropping all of our candy and heading over to that woman's house from earlier. We knocked and we knocked, and we rang the doorbell a whole bunch of times, and finally, she opens it up. Naturally, she wanted to know what the cause of the concern was. Thus, we go into full detail with what had happened. Once done, the woman calls officers and they head over to the area where the possible abduction took place. Officers then knocked on the lady's front door 15 minutes later. Unfortunately, they regretted to inform us that he had gotten away. However, they were able to get some DNA evidence. I'll explain the results of the test in just a few moments. Anyways, the officers offered to drive us back to my house, and we agreed. As we make the drive over, the officer explains the following. I'm not sure if you kids know this, but that neighborhood you were walking in, it's notorious for a lot of criminal activity. You should be careful. Both Jeremy and I were shocked. We never thought this nice-looking neighborhood would have that sort of issue. Fast forward some nights later, we get a knock at the front door. It was the cops, and they request to come in to have a word. Turned out they had some information to share that really added to the creepiness. Remember that guy from Halloween night? Well, it turned out that he wasn't even from Nevada. Instead, he was from another state. Of course, due to privacy reasons, I won't give you his name. But either way, he's wanted for various different crimes. Abduction just being one of them. Oh, and he also literally ended somebody in Arizona. No joke. To this day, he has never been caught. Story number 2. Clowning around in the night. I remember this creepy experience taking place around 2005 when I ended up going trick-or-treating. Now, to give you a little bit of context, I'm female and I was a freshman in high school. I was dressed up as Little Red Riding Hood. Now, on this Halloween, I ended up going with my mom and heading to a Halloween party her boss was holding. It was cool because there were a whole bunch of other kids, so I didn't feel too alone. We played a bunch of video games, we ran around the backyard playing tag and hide and go seek, but eventually, I started to get bored. Thus, I told my mom I wanted to go trick-or-treating in the surrounding neighborhood. My mom's boss lived in one of those high-end private housing communities, so my mom wasn't too worried with me being out on my own. Just don't be out for too long. I expect you back here in an hour, she told me. With that, I grabbed a pillowcase my mom's boss lent me, and I started to go house to house. After about 40 minutes of trick-or-treating, I got bored of visiting the same homes. Thus, I decided to exit this private little community and go across the street. You see, as we were driving over here, we saw this really cool haunted house that had a whole bunch of cars and trick-or-treaters. I knew I was cutting it close with the time, but I thought I would be in and out in just about 10 minutes. So I did get through the house fairly quickly, albeit with a lot of scares. And once I was out, I started to text my mom. It's while doing this at the end of the street, I started to hear footsteps behind me. I turned around, and it was a large man in a clown costume. It was creepy, but it's Halloween, so it's all good fun.
Hey, how would you like to come with me? I've got a whole lot of candy in my van. Come on, I'm passing it out to kids. Want some?
I knew not to trust strangers, so I tell him I wasn't interested. This upsets him, and he replies with an angry,
That's not a request. It's an order. You're gonna go with me whether you like it or not.
He then grabs my arm and begins pulling me toward a nearby alleyway. Let me just say, this guy was super strong, and I struggled to get away from him. I remember him even taking out a knife from his pocket and saying that if I kept moving, I would be sorry. I thought this was going to be it for me. I mean, out of all nights, nobody was hearing me. But then, my moment. A couple of police officers were conveniently starting to drive down the alleyway, driving toward us. Seeing this vehicle, the clown lets go of me and jumps into somebody's backyard. I was pretty much crying and waving down to the police as I now explained what had just happened. The officers ended up going to search for the creep, and they found him hiding in an old shed. When all was said and done, another couple of officers returned me back to the Halloween party, and my mom immediately thought I had gotten into trouble. If only she knew. Story number 3. Halloween Break-In. From the title of my story, you can probably already tell that this takes place on Halloween. Well, I guess in a way that's a lie. I mean, it does start on Halloween night, but it carries over into the following morning. Here's what went down. I want to take you back to when I was roughly 10 years old. We're talking about 2002. It was Halloween, and I, along with my older sister, who was 17, went trick-or-treating in this really nice neighborhood, about 20 minutes from my home. The reason we went is because the homes there are well known for giving out full-size chocolate bars and expensive candies. And let me tell you, we sure got a handful. Other than that, I do remember it freezing. By the way, I was dressed up as Alice from Alice in Wonderland. Anyways, my sister is taking me to all of these homes, and we're having a good time. Before getting back to our car, however, this man in a ghost face outfit approaches both my sister and I. He says,
Oh, how cute. Can I get a picture with you?
honestly, it didn't sound like too big of a deal, so I said sure. After all, he was with another person dressed up as Michael Myers, and I liked scary movies, even as a kid. That's why I sorta got excited. How I wish I wasn't so friendly. After the picture, they wanted to know if my sister had a boyfriend and if she wanted to hang out with them. My sister responded by saying she was already seeing someone, and this caused the two to get mad.
Oh, come on. He can't be as great as us. Come on, we can show you a good time. Plus, we could always drop your sister off at the house.
Things went from innocent to creepy really fast. We excused ourselves thinking they were just being some edgy teenagers trying to get underneath our skin. As we started to drive away, however, we did notice this silver Corolla that kept up with both my sister and I. My sister, thinking we were being followed, made a whole bunch of turns down various streets. They followed each and every time. Eventually, we lose sight of them and we head home. This, however, isn't the end of my story. After all, I didn't call it Halloween break-in for nothing. Fast forward a few hours later, and I'm in bed playing Pokemon Silver. All of a sudden, my cat started to meow and scratch at my bedroom window. I ignored her for a while, since she does tend to do that, but it was starting to annoy me. Thus, I crawl out of bed and walk over to look outside. My bedroom window is on the second story and overlooks my backyard, by the way. Well, it's in the backyard. I'm able to see some people in what looked to be like costumes trying to open her back kitchen door. The more I focused on them, the more they appeared like the same ones we saw hours earlier. I remember getting the chills as I run over to my parents' room. Mom! Dad! Wake up! Somebody's trying to break into the house! After what seemed like forever, my dad finally wakes up. What, honey? What do you mean? There's some masked people. They're trying to come in through the back kitchen door. Come on, you have to wake up. At that moment, we hear footsteps coming from downstairs. Immediately, my dad goes into full protective mode. He grabs the pistol he keeps in the drawer and tells both my mom and I to stay where we are. Don't you open the door unless I say it's me. Do you understand? He leaves as we fear the worst. After about 20 seconds, we hear a round fire, followed by the sounds of footsteps running out of the home. Again, we feared the worst, but my dad eventually returns along with my sister. You were right, honey. There were two masked men. One was dressed up as Ghostface, and the other was Michael Myers. Both of them had knives. So that was when my dad says he fired off a warning shot, and these two take off running like roadrunners. That was pretty much the end of that, until a week later. On our front porch, we found a pumpkin basket of candy, along with an envelope. We opened the envelope, and inside is simply a picture of my sister, with a heart circled around her. The thing is, the picture was from the night we met the two masked Halloween characters. See, we didn't know, but the two had managed to sneak in a picture of my sister while she thought they were taking a picture of me. We later determined that I was just a distraction. To this day, we don't know who the two were, but they never returned. A lot of my friends say it could have been a prank from my sister's friends, but I don't think they would break into the home with knives. What do you think? Some stalkers who got a scare of their lives after encountering my dad? Or just some dumb joke gone wrong? Either way, it's still pretty creepy. Story number 4. A Pirate's Creepy Tale. This happened back in 2015. I had gone to a Halloween party my dorm roommate was throwing over at her parents' house. I went dressed up as a pirate. I'm female, and I was 19, if it's any important. Over the course of a few hours, we spent time dancing to music, carving pumpkins, having amazing food, and passing out candy to the kids. Now, during my friends and I passing out candy, there would be some older kids who would compliment me. Most of it was innocent, but one man in particular was a bit odd. For starters, this guy looked nothing like a kid. He was easily in his early 50s, short, slightly overweight, with a thinning hairline. He wasn't even dressed up as any character either. He just had some dirty blue overalls,
Trick or treat.
the man said as he walked up to me. I put some candy in his pumpkin bucket before he whispered,
You're really cute. Would you like to come back to my place?
I let out a sigh of disgust, and this caught the attention of my friend's dad. Is everything okay over here?
Oh, yeah. I was just telling your daughter she's really pretty.
Oh, she's not my daughter. The pirate? No, my daughter's in the house.
Well, regardless, nice meeting you, kid.
The dad walks away as this man just sort of stands there looking at the candy I gave him. Bear in mind, my other friends were busy passing out candy.
I can't wait to take you home with me.
He said again as he leaned closer, whispering in my ear. I could feel the warm garbage smell of his breath and see the yellow stains in his teeth. He finally walks away, and I'm genuinely creeped out by the whole encounter. Now, trust me when I say this. I honestly wish that was the only creepy moment for the evening. Just some random guy thinking he could try to get me to go with him, presumably to do whatever he wanted, which, let's face it, wasn't good. But the story was about to get worse, at least for me. Fast forward to around 11 p.m., and I was getting ready to go back to the dorm. As for my roommate, she was going to stay at her parents' house for a couple more days. Are you sure you don't want to stay here? After all, school isn't until Monday. Nah, I'm good. I have some things I need to take care of. Oh, are you talking about the essay that's due? Yeah, that's the one. Well, okay. Get home safe. I'll see you back at the dorm on Sunday. Thus, I'm finally on the road around 11:30 p.m. But here's the thing. For some reason, I started to get a bit of a headache. I later determined it to be me drinking too much soda and having no water. Annoying, but I went ahead and drove over to a CVS pharmacy to pick up some Tylenol. I also thought, why not take the time to pick up some microwavable food for the next couple of days? So I arrive, and the cashier greets me with a friendly smile. And then I head over to the back of the store and grab the food and medicine. Then I pay and begin to walk out. At that moment, I ended up getting a text message from my friend, so I stood at the entrance of the CVS pharmacy, and I respond. Here's one thing I learned. Never look down at your phone and become distracted, especially during the night, because suddenly I felt a tight grasp on my arm and another one covering my mouth. I couldn't believe how unlucky I was. 10 minutes of a drive from my friend's house at a CVS pharmacy was the man I gave candy to just a couple of hours earlier. I was at a loss of words as he began to pull me toward a beat-up SUV. The only reason I was able to get away was because an older couple saw what was happening. I also bit down as hard as I could on his hand, which I can still remember the nasty, salty, and sweaty taste. Gross. Nevertheless, I'm able to run over to this couple, as last thing I remember happening was him getting into his SUV and driving away. I remember thanking the couple profusely, and they offered to drive next to me as I got back to my dorm. They did, and the SUV was never seen again. Speaking of that SUV, when I started thinking back on it when I was in my room, I started to realize something. When I left my friend's house, I noticed the same looking SUV following me to the CVS. I only recall the SUV because something clicked in my head when I saw it. I just couldn't put two and two together, due to the fact I was almost taken. To this day, as far as I know, he has never been caught, and I never saw him again. I think that's what makes the whole thing even scarier. Story number 5. It started with photographs. I'm not sure about a lot of you, but Halloween is hands down my favorite time of the year. Not so much for the costumes and the candy, but the fact that it's our one night as young adults to act like kids and have fun. Working a mundane Monday to Friday job can really fry your brain. That's why I always look forward to the holidays. Anyways, this was back in the mid-2000s, when I was around 12 years old, and work was the least of my concerns. It was a couple of weeks before Halloween, and I remember I was coming back home from school. Being an only child, I often walked to and from school, as both my mom and my dad worked long hours at their jobs. Well, as I was getting closer to my house, I couldn't help but notice somebody standing on my front lawn, taking pictures. Yeah, you heard that right. I saw various flashes from a camera as this guy walked from one side of my home to the other. I was confused. I thought perhaps maybe he worked with the city or maybe my dad had called him over. When I finally arrived, the man told me he really admired my home and was taking pictures to show his family. Honestly, I don't remember there being anything special about our home. We live in your typical middle-class neighborhood, and it doesn't see anyone drive fancy cars or have fancy homes. You might have thought, well, didn't you mention this taking place right before Halloween? Perhaps he was taking pictures of your decorations. The thing is, we had no decorations of any sort. I actually remember putting up the decorations that year. It was just a few days before Halloween Eve. Anyways, he sorta just walks away and gets into an old Honda Civic, and he leaves. This was something I brought up during dinner when my parents arrived. No, as far as we know, no one was supposed to come and check the house. Are you sure that's what you saw? My mom and dad sort of wrote it off, and I soon forgot about it the next day at school. Fast forward to Halloween Eve, the night we set up decorations. It was a Friday, and after we decorated, my parents went to my school to attend a parent-teacher conference. Meanwhile, I stayed over at my friend Jasmine's house. She only lived 2 minutes of a walk away from me. At around 7:30 p.m., Jasmine wanted to go over to my house so that we could play Mario Party 4 on my Nintendo GameCube. So we arrived, and a couple of hours later, we were really into our gaming session, eating popcorn and drinking soda. Eventually, I volunteered to head downstairs and go to the kitchen to throw everything away. So I'm walking down the stairs and all is fine, until I turn the corner of the hallway. It's at this point I can just see the kitchen. Well, there crawling through my kitchen window was a masked man, and I can see a pistol. Suddenly, I got the chills, and I remember tiptoeing my way back up into the room. Jasmine was caught off guard, and first thing I remember her saying was, "I thought you were throwing the popcorn away." "What, did you see a ghost? What's up with you?" "Dude, that's not it. There's a guy downstairs. He's in the kitchen." Did I have Jasmine's attention now? You bet I did. But here was the problem. How do we get help if there's no phone in my room? This was a time when cell phones weren't exactly available. So in order to get police to your house, you had to call using your landline. Luckily, there is a landline inside my parents' room. That's where we head. However, as we passed the staircase, we happened to see the shadow of the intruder passing by, heading toward the living room. Bear in mind, he's still downstairs. How he didn't hear us or see us to this day, I'm not too sure. But had he, I think things could have turned out pretty bad. Eventually, we reach my parents' room and we get on the phone. But another problem presented itself. The call wouldn't go through, and I'll explain why in a bit, and it's what makes this whole thing that much more frightening. We were running out of time, and we knew unless we could get to the front door, we were in for it. Now let me explain this really quickly about my parents' room. Their door was actually being replaced with a new one. Sadly, it hadn't been installed, which meant there was no way to lock ourselves in. So back to my room. That didn't happen, because right before we exit my parents' room, we started to hear footsteps coming up to the second story. Moments later, we saw him reach the top of the steps. Then, he begins walking over to my room. Jasmine and I hide under the bed, putting some pillows in front of us, hoping if he did come over here, he wouldn't see us. Now I guess we could have run downstairs, but my room was literally right in front of the stairs. He would have seen us a mile away. Thus, we wait, and 3 minutes later, the footsteps walk over to my parents' room. It's at this moment I'm able to get a better look at him when he enters. The man who had shown up weeks before taking pictures of my house was now in it, with a large pillowcase. I would later determine he was robbing the house and had a bunch of our valuables in there. Nonetheless, we stayed quiet as we hear him going through my parents' drawers. At one point, he drops some of my mom's jewelry, and one of her rings falls right in front of the bed. We both started sweating. We thought that if he bent down to grab the ring, he would have seen our hiding spot. Luckily, even though he does grab it and reaches it, he doesn't manage to see us. Another few minutes of him putting things in this pillowcase, he leaves and the footsteps go silent. We must have been waiting there for a solid 15 minutes, and we eventually heard my parents arrive. My dad was furious, going on about how things were a mess. This was when we finally run downstairs and we explain everything that had happened. So, my mom tries to call the police, but another problem. Seriously, so many. The phone isn't working, just like earlier. So, we go over to Jasmine's house and call from there. When they arrived and they searched the home, they saw that the phone line had been cut. That explained why none of our calls were going through. Anyways, they collected some evidence, and a few weeks later, we ended up getting most of our things back. The guy who had broken into our home was connected with a bunch of other break-ins and was caught. So, there you have it. A Halloween break-in story that really changed my outlook of being by myself at home. By the way, we ended up changing all the doors and locks and installed a security system. 10 years later, I now live on my own in another state, and my parents sold the home just last year. Before we get to the last story, I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching. Just remember, if you'd like to see more, including sneak peeks and previews, then make sure to be following my Instagram, @TheCreepyFoxOfficial. Also, make sure to check out my brand new merchandise. You can either check it out underneath the video player right now, or you can find it in the link in the description below. But with that said, let's get on to the last story, because it's a pretty good one. And now we've reached our final story, The Frisbee Man. Alone on Halloween night. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, all I was going to do was pass out candy and catch up on some drawing. Apparently, everything can go wrong, as I'm soon about to retell you. Okay, so just a quick explanation to start us off. I was 15 years old, and this was back around 2008 on Halloween night. I was home alone sitting outside on my front porch, giving out candy to the neighborhood kids. I was too old for trick-or-treating, but I still ended up dressing up as a spooky nurse. Anyways, while I passed out candy, I had some music playing, and I was drawing in my notebook. You see, I remember having to turn in some sketches for my art class, and I'd fallen behind. Therefore, I was taking the time to do that work. The night goes by fairly smoothly, until about 9 p.m. I'd returned from using the restroom, and some guy, not in a costume, was walking over to the side of my house. He looked homeless. Excuse me, but what in the world are you doing?
Oh, sorry. I threw my frisbee into your backyard. I was just gonna go and get it.
Well, wait right there. I'll go and grab it for you.
No, don't worry about it. Just keep it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I don't want it anymore.
The suspicious man then walks away, and I started to feel like something was wrong. I mean, just by the way he spoke, it sounded as if he was on something. Either way, I actually went into my backyard to find this supposed frisbee, but I found none. This was when I should have called the police. After all, he might have been trying to break in. The frisbee was most likely a cover, as I'd caught him. But I decided not to call, a decision I would later regret. Nevertheless, I stayed outside for about 30 more minutes before wrapping up for the night and returning back to my room. Fast forward to around 11 p.m., and I was now done with my drawing. I was just watching some videos on my computer. Suddenly, I got the urge to grab some milk and cookies. So, I head downstairs into the kitchen. I grab the cookies from the cupboards, and I now go to pour some milk into a cup. At this moment, I just so happen to be standing next to a little window that overlooks our backyard. In the darkness of my barren backyard, I was able to see movement. The more I focused on it, the more I realized the movement wasn't from a neighborhood cat or a squirrel. It was too big to be one. No, instead, there was a person in a hoodie trying to open my dad's shed. I got the chills, but then I explained it as perhaps my parents arriving early. Maybe I was seeing my dad. Either way, I run over to the front living room window to confirm this. However, my parents' car isn't in the driveway. So, who was back there? I return back to the kitchen, and that's when I get a scare of a lifetime. The suspicious frisbee man from earlier was messing with a door handle. What are you doing in my backyard? Get out! Right now!
No, let me inside the house, or you'll be sorry.
He reaches into his pocket and takes out a knife. I suddenly froze at that sight, but then I snap out of it as he slams his foot against the back door. He was trying to get inside. I book it up to my room where I start calling for police, and in the middle of the conversation, I heard a loud crashing sound, which I later found out was the window being shattered open. I explained the shattering to the officers as I now went into the restroom to hide. What seemed like hours was more like 5 minutes, and I eventually saw two police cruisers pull up into the driveway from my bathroom window. I'll save you all the details, but in summary, officers searched my entire home and property, but the man had gotten away. What he wanted was a mystery to me, because he didn't even take anything. So, it still remained unexplained all these years later.